Have you ever been asked to do something that took you way out of your comfort zone? Maybe something like give a 5-minute fireside thousands of people might watch. Well, obviously, if you have, I can relate. And I've learned a few things from a woman in church history that might help us both. I'm Wendy Ulrich, and this is my 5-minute fireside. A couple of years ago, I read a story about a woman, a Latter-day Saint in the early days of the church by the name of Elizabeth Claridge McCune. In this story, Sister McCune was a 45-year-old mother of 7. Her husband had been one of the most successful businessmen in Utah, and they traveled on an extensive family vacation to Great Britain. Now, it turns out that in Great Britain, a book had been published by a disaffected member of the church that was very critical of the church and especially critical of its treatment of women. Elizabeth was asked to speak on very short notice by the mission presidency there. She told the crowd gathered, "Our husbands are proud of their wives and daughters. They do not consider that they were created solely to wash dishes and tend babies. Our religion teaches us that the wife stands shoulder to shoulder with the husband." Elizabeth's talk was so effective that she was asked repeatedly to continue to speak to other congregations. Eventually, the mission presidency wrote to the first presidency in Salt Lake City asking that capable sister missionaries be called full-time to come to the Great Britain mission, the European mission. And the first presidency, just a few months later, called the first 2 single sister missionaries in the history of the church to go to that mission. I am so grateful for the work of Elizabeth McCune, for her courage and her faith in stepping up to the opportunity that she was given. It's really impossible to measure the impact that she had on the church and on the world. As just one example, I am a 3rd-generation sister missionary. My grandmother, my mother, myself, and my daughters and daughter-in-law have all served missions. And as hard as those experiences were, we've been blessed and our families have been blessed by them. I'm especially grateful as I'm trying to figure out myself how women in the church can obtain and use priesthood power. I learn a lot from the example of Sister Elizabeth McCune. Let me share a few of those with you. First of all, Elizabeth acted under proper authority. She didn't just jump up to the pulpit and grab the microphone, if there were microphones then, and start talking. She was given an assignment by someone who held priesthood keys. This makes me kind of stop and think, what are the roles and responsibilities and callings and assignments that I've been given? What mission have you been assigned that you've learned about through priesthood blessings, for example? Because anything you've been authorized by the priesthood to do through your covenants, through blessings, through assignments and callings, you have the right to priesthood power to do as well. Second, Elizabeth had a deep desire to participate in missionary work and to do the work of the Lord. She writes, "While abroad, I always had a burning desire in my heart to give our Father's children what I knew to be the truth. It isn't always easy to know what we want most, what we value most, what we long for, and what we love. But when we do the hard work of clarifying our desires, the Lord will help us to fulfill them." Without even realizing it, perhaps, Elizabeth had practiced and prepared for the assignment that she was about to be given. For example, she loved to go out with the missionaries when they did street contacting and street meetings. She watched what they did, she listened, and she learned. She was prepared by quiet conversations that she'd had with people in their homes. We can also begin to think about, what can I be doing now within the sphere of influence I have currently to study, to practice the hard parts, to prepare and qualify myself for the work that I want to do in this world, for the difference that I want to make. Fourth, Elizabeth definitely faced her fears. When she was called to do this particular talk, she was actually sitting in the afternoon session of the London conference when a member of the mission presidency stepped up to the pulpit and announced to everyone, including her, that she would be speaking that evening. She said when she heard those words, it nearly frightened her to death. I found that I too feel anxious and worried about my inadequacies when I'm asked to do something that takes me out of my comfort zone. But Elizabeth stepped forward with courage anyway. I've learned from hard experience that anxiety is the constant companion of anyone who wants to live a meaningful life. We don't just get rid of it or escape it or avoid it, but we need to be willing to step up and face the things we're afraid of and not try to get rid of our anxiety, but to tame it enough that we can move forward, confident that the Lord will help us as we do. Finally, Elizabeth seems to have trusted that God could use both her strengths and her weaknesses in his work. She knew she'd been given remarkable gifts and strengths. She had great wealth. She'd had opportunities for travel and education. She considered those strengths a stewardship, she said, something that she could consecrate to the Lord and develop and use for his purposes. But she also had challenges and weaknesses and setbacks in her life, heartaches that she faced. And she had to trust that the Lord could use those weaknesses also to accomplish his work. For example, her husband's faith had waned in his pursuit of his business. She didn't have a formal title that gave her credibility with the people she was speaking to, and she had never considered herself a speaker or someone of great talent in that regard. But she stepped up to the opportunity that was given to her, trusting that the Lord could use both her strengths and her weaknesses, and that in fact her strengths mattered more than her weaknesses did in fulfilling the work she'd been given. So I'd invite you to consider, what strengths and gifts have I been given that I can magnify and use for the Lord's service? And what have I learned from conquering my weaknesses or facing setbacks or failures or heartache that might give me compassion and empathy, humility and faith that I can share with others to lift and boost those around me? When the time came, Elizabeth not only stepped up to the opportunity she was given, but she helped open the door for countless other women to do so as well. My life has been deeply impacted and changed by the mission I served, and by the example and legacy of Elizabeth McCune and countless other women who have shown me how women can step up with priesthood authority and priesthood power to the privileges that we've been given to participate in God's work. We can do what she did to make these things happen for others as well. Thank you for joining me. I'm Wendy Ulrich, and that was my 5-minute fireside.